My name is Jack and I'm a growth operator who helps entrepreneurs doing 5 to 10k a month to scale their business with their personal brand. And in today's video, I'll be going through the exact protocol that I give my own clients to find their brand identity. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin with the video. Okay, let's get started. So what actually makes a great brand, right? Most of you look at these logos and think a brand is to do with the logo or the visual aesthetic, right? But that's completely backwards thinking. Because who actually cares about the logo? Who actually cares about the name of the brand? Practically no one, right? And so what do they care about? You see, people care about themselves a lot, right? So they want to kind of find a reason to make it seem like that the brand is doing them something, right? It benefits them somehow. So a great quote that I like to go by is, a good brand allows people to believe in you, but a great brand allows people to believe in themselves. And so that kind of reveals what brand actually is. It's a feeling, it's emotion associated with that brand. And so how do you actually develop that feeling? And how do you actually refine that feeling so it resonates with your ICP? Well, we can start with why. That was a pretty cool segment. And the model itself is genuinely called Start With Why. And it's developed by this really good author called Simon Sinek. And he made an incredibly easy way to understand what this feeling or what this emotion is, right? So you can think of it as an onion, right? On the outside is the what. That's your offer. That's what you literally offer your audience, right? And the how is your fulfillment. So that's how you get from step 1 to step 2 and how you can let your audience get from step 1 to step 2. But in the center of this circle, of this onion, is the why. So that's what you genuinely stand for. These are like your core beliefs or your core truths in a way. And so let's take a look at these examples and some of these top brands and see what their why is. So first we have Suwego, we have Nike, and we have McDonald's. You can see that Suwego's why is that you don't need to work 12-hour days to get to where you want. You can work lower hours and get greater results, leading to less stress and less burnout and overall greater progression. That's his why. Because nowadays, so many business gurus and so many growth operators just think you need to work 24/7, right? You need to work 12-hour days, 14-hour days, to the point where they're working 40-hour days, which is impossible. But that's where they're trying to go at. And so of course you're thinking to yourself, that's kind of crazy, right? 12-hour days for years and years on end. That's pretty crazy. So that's where Suwei injects his why and reframes your belief. And he's saying, no, you don't actually need to work 12-hour days. You can make just as much progress with 4-hour days. Next, we have Nike, which is a sportswear brand, obviously. And their why isn't just the durability of their clothes, right? It's not how good the quality of the cotton is of their shirts, or it's not how elastic the t-shirts are. It's how not durable how the t-shirts are. But rather, their why is performing past limits and constantly striving for greatness. So what I mean by this is when you see any advert, when you see anything related to Nike, the internal message or the internal why is you're pushing past your physical limits, right? You're literally peaking. That's what they want you to feel. They want you to feel like you're just peaking at the, activity that you're doing or any activity that you're doing. You're literally performing at the highest level that you can. And so they want you to embody that feeling through their clothes. So you see, that's their offer, right? So their offer is clothes. Their fulfillment is you wearing them. And what they stand for is once you wear them, you feel like you're performing the best. And that's an enriching and fulfilling feeling. Next, we had a food brand, right? McDonald's. What they sell is cheap and easy food, fast food, very unhealthy. But why are they still so popular? It's not the fact that their food is tasty. It's not the fact that they're cheap. But rather it's the fact that they're making food stress-free. Because in this economy, food is so expensive, right? It takes so long to cook. And after a long day of work, who likes to cook, right? And so what they reframed their messaging is that food isn't meant to be hard. Food is meant to be chill, It's meant to be a fun time with your friends. And it's meant to be a relaxing time after work. So what they instead did is reframe their messaging so that it's, stress-free. After a long day of work, relaxing. It's very cheap in this economy. And so that buys in a lot of their audience. And you can see by this that the why is very unforgettable, but their commodity is very forgettable. So if Suway Go just said, oh yeah, I do consulting, I scale, this person from 10k a month to 100k a month in 6 months, it has a bit of an effect, but really, it doesn't. Same with Nike. If they just sell clothes and shoes, everyone sells clothes and shoes. But what makes Nike different? It's their why. It's their internal message. And same with McDonald's, food and drink, right? Everyone sells food and drink. You need food and drink to survive. But why is McDonald's always at the top of the food chain? Because they have made their message unbelievably unforgettable. And so you're thinking to yourself, how do I find this why? What can I do to find this why? And so I pose to you 3 big questions to ask. And these 3 questions will take up the majority of this video. And I'll address each section one by one so you get a perfect understanding of what to do next after watching this video. So the 3 questions to ask is, what do you represent? Next is, what do you want your audience to feel? And lastly, what is your mission? And I'll address these right now. So what do you represent? A few examples could be your core values, your core beliefs, your common enemy. But lastly is something that I think not many people talk about, but I think it's genuinely the most underrated and the most important thing that you can think of. It's your why does no one else see this? It's that belief that you have that no one else sees, right? It's something it's true, but just no one else sees it, or the majority of the people don't see it. For example, in my case, it's building a personal brand right now in this economy, in this generation. And I tell this to everyone that I know. They're like, start building a personal brand, start building a personal brand. No one listens. It's because they don't understand how insanely powerful a really solid personal brand could be, right? And so that's my why does no one see this? It's like building a personal brand right now. And what makes it so powerful is that it brings the authenticity into everything that you do. Because you stay true to your core and no one can shift your belief on this. If you have a really, crumbly foundation and someone just says, oh no, you're wrong, and then you just admit to that, that's not really your core values. Your core values are the values that make you up as a person. And we'll get to Scotoma, which is just such a cool concept, but we'll get to that later. Next, we'll have a look at the perception and belief pyramid. So essentially what this is your beliefs are obviously the foundational beliefs that you have as a person. And what's interesting is your actions are determined from your beliefs, right? So if you look going up the pyramid, the beliefs impact the actions, and the actions impact, this is the perception of like other people. This is what other people perceive you to be. And so if you just have a look at this, what's so cool is your belief, right, directly can impact someone else's perception if and only if your actions align. So what I mean by this is, if you look at this equation right here, belief minus perception is delta. And delta means just a small change, right? Or just a change in general. And the bigger the change, the bigger the delta, the more, or like the less people believe in you, the more people doubt you, right? Because what it actually is your actions are determined from your beliefs. Once you understand this and genuinely like implement this into your brand, it's so powerful. So your actions are determined by your beliefs, right? And other people see you through your actions. They don't see you through your beliefs. They see you through your actions. And so the moment your actions don't align with your beliefs, because action is just the bridge between your belief and your perception. Or sorry, your belief and other people's perception of you, right? So if your action doesn't align with your belief, then other people will look at that action, and because they know your belief, right? I mean, once you like internalize your belief, it'll come up everywhere, right? Through your content subconsciously, or through the way you speak subconsciously. But once your actions don't align with your beliefs, their perception is skewed. And so they kind of, in their own mind, they think of this equation, or they feel this equation, right? Because their belief your belief, or the things that you stand for, and their perception of what they think you stand for is more and more and more and more big, right? Once that happens, they just start to believe you less, or they start to take you less seriously, because they're like, this person is so different to what they portray themselves to be, but the actions don't align with what they're saying. So like, what do I trust, right? And so that diminishes the level of trust. And that's a fundamental thing that you need to like deepen, is your belief and your perception. All right, next, what do you want your audience to feel? This is like the meaty part. Once you understand this, it's crazy how powerful this is. Because every human has 5 different needs, right? First is significance, then certainty, love, connection, growth, contribution. And I'll explain what each one is. So you can think of significance as an ego boost. Almost like, for example, a teenage boy, right? He wants to impress a girl. He wants to feel significant. That's what you say is significant. Certainty, it's more about monetary. So that could be monetary certainty or financial stability, that you know you can like bring food the next day, or that you know you can have a place to sleep. That's all financial stability. And 1 and 2, so significance and certainty, are the majority of the things that like people really, really want, especially in this generation, and especially for your ICP. Next is love and connection. So that's like feeling like you belong somewhere. That's in a group. It's quite self-explanatory. Growth is personal growth, right? So either growing at the gym, that's physical growth, or growing spiritually, or mentally, you know, always just evolving. People, especially entrepreneurs, they do not like to just settle at one spot. As you probably know yourself, right? You're probably an entrepreneur watching this right now. And so you constantly want to be evolving. You constantly want to be improving, right? And so that's also a need. And 5th is contribution. This is very rare, because only at the top of the top, once all these four are met, contribution is then met, or like contribute, or then like they want contribution. And that's essentially where you want to contribute for the greater good, where it's kind of like donating, like charity. That's why charities exist, right? People want to feel a need to contribute to the greater good. And that's essentially the 5 human needs. And so we'll definitely use this as I continue this presentation. And a fundamental thing that a fundamental mechanism that you need to understand is that people want something, but deep down they desire a need. And that's something that's super, super important. For example, if you hear someone say, I want to buy a Ferrari, you can think, oh, they just want a Ferrari, right? But no. Deep down, they crave social significance. Do you see how these correlate? Because once they have the Ferrari, it's never about the Ferrari, right? It's about like seeming rich. It's about other people pointing at the Ferrari and saying, wow, like that kid made it. And being the kid, you're probably like, oh, like, you know, boosted your ego, like social significance, right? So it's never about the Ferrari. You always have to look one layer deeper. And also, when someone says, I want to be rich, do you think they actually mean, I want to be rich? Because no, they don't. What they want is they want to be certain that they can buy food the very next day. They want to be certain that they can have a place to live tomorrow. And so what is this? This is a certainty need. And so you see how everything that they want, there's always a lower surface of need. And once you begin to differentiate these two and you start targeting their need instead of their want, that's when real sales happen. And that's genuinely when you build a magnetic brand, because you're speaking to the heart, you're speaking to the need, right? Because everyone wants their needs to be met, but not everyone, like, they don't need their wants to be met, if that makes sense. It's quite a play on words. And so you have to understand that the difference between the want, so that's the surface level, and the need, that's the more intrinsic and deeper level. If the depth or like the difference between the two is bigger, then the greater the impact your ICP audience will feel. And so currently you're probably like struggling to even understand your ICP. Like, how the hell am I supposed to know what they want, what they need, right? And so I got you. What you want to do is either ask them directly these 5 questions. What is their dream? What were their failures? What is their biggest fear? What suspicion do they have? And who or what is their common enemy? And so there's 2 ways of doing this. Either directly asking them in DMs or in a poll, or giving them a lead magnet, but then asking them to fill in these questions before giving out the resources. And that's how you collect, data. That's genuinely how you just collect data. And so once you do this, and once you gather a few of these, maybe 50 or 100, you start to see patterns. And you start to see patterns of wants and patterns of needs, right? And so after you have all that data, you want to really dial in your messaging and target the need. Because most coaches right now, most consultants, they're like, oh, we'll help you scale from X, Y, Z to ABC, right? We'll help you scale from 10K to 100K in 6 months. Or like, we'll get you like at least 100K in 6 months, something like that. And so that's targeting the want. That's targeting the monetary value, right? But what they should be doing is targeting the need, or like, will make you financially stable so you'll be certain that you can provide for your family. Or like, will allow you to be in a position where you can connect and, interact with a wide group of people in a community. And that's targeting the connection. And so you have to realize people buy from emotions. They don't buy from logic. And there's been a study done by this. And the term affect heuristic was coined, where you judge something as good or bad based on how it feels. Then you use that feeling to reason about the risk and the benefits instead of the other way round. So what most coaches think is, if I just tell them logically what will happen if they don't buy into this, no one will buy into your coaching program, because they don't buy into logic. They buy into emotion. They buy into how you make them feel. So after this program, you'll realize that it's all just to do with feeling, and it's all just to do with their feeling specifically, because everyone wants people to understand them. And so if you speak into their feeling, then that's where the money is. And so I'll give you a really good way of doing this. So some of you might know this, some of you might not, but this is the map of consciousness by Dr. R. Hawkins, who was an incredible psychiatrist. And so he developed this map where this is the level of emotion, right? Let me just change this color so you can see more clearly. Okay. So everyone starts at one of these levels, right? And you can see the energetic log. 1000 is the top of the top, and 0 is definitely, obviously the bottom. And so everyone starts somewhere. So most people, I say the majority of people, start in this area. So where they start with fear, desire, or anger. And so essentially what you want to do is you meet them at where they are. For example, if you don't, let's just say you're in a different country and someone starts speaking Japanese to you, just out of the blue, you're not going to understand a single thing. But if they speak English to you, you're going to be, that's understandable. I see what you mean, right? So you want to meet them where they are, right? And you want to raise their consciousness. So obviously you want to raise their consciousness up to enlightenment, but that's physically impossible, literally. So you want to raise their consciousness as much as possible. So maybe from anger, which is a score of 150, to reason, which is a score of 400, right? And so after you raise their consciousness, after you made them realize or gave them a reframe of your unique mechanism, then you need to bring them back down immediately. And so what that does is it creates what I like to call an emotional delta right here. And so what an emotional delta is the difference of emotional energetic log between the current state that they are right now and the state that they are when you're around, right? And so when you bring them back down, you make them realize, or you give them the hard reality check. And I'll give you a really good example for this. So imagine you're a really successful entrepreneur. You made tens of millions of dollars when you're in your 20s, right? But now you're in your 30s and you've lost everything. Don't know by what, maybe by a bad business partner, but you've lost the majority of your wealth. Do you think you would be more likely to try even harder to gain all that wealth back? Of course you would, because you experienced the high. You already know what it's like you already know what it feels like to be up there, right? And now you're down here. So obviously you want to go up again. That's just human nature. Compared to, let's just say, a rookie entrepreneur who got 10K a month, right? And, he lost everything. That's not much because the emotional delta is so small. But in the first example, if you're a multi-millionaire, you lost everything. Of course, you would want to get back as soon as possible. And you do so much and you do everything to get back up. And so that's what I mean by increasing your emotional delta. And so you want your brand to make your ICP realize that, you know, where they are right now is far from where they could be. And so that takes time. That takes reasoning. That takes time sitting by yourself and allowing yourself to think, how the hell do I make them think that, you know, I can bring them up there? Or like, how the hell do I make them think that they're down here, but they could be up there? Because everyone wants to meet their needs. Because your personal brand isn't there to sell them straight up on your offer. No. It's to make them realize that, oh shit, like this can actually fix my deficiency. And by deficiency, I mean deficiency in human needs. And you see how these all just connect together? And so this is really deep. You're like 1% of the time, you're never going to hear about any of these, because it's like really deep into the psychology of human behavior and why someone wants to actually do something. And once you realize this, and once you actually utilize this and implement this into your brand identity, bro, like it's crazy. It's crazy how effective this is, because no one knows what this is about. And last, we have the mission. So there are two types of missions, right? First, the mission which is personal to you, which is called the intrinsic mission. Or there's an external mission, or for the people. It's called extrinsic mission. And so to find out your mission, you have to ask these three questions, right? You got to work downwards. So what are we actually doing? What is the physical implementation of what you're doing? So if you're a consultant, your physical implementation probably would be giving your clients the SOPs needed to scale from 10K to 50K. And what does that represent if it succeeds? Does it align with your message? Does it not align with your message? Think about it. What does it actually represent if it succeeds? And third, what does the world look like if this actually works? What difference can you make in this world when your implementation actually works? And the answer to this, the last question, will be your overarching mission, right? Is the main mission that you go by. For example, I'll give you a SpaceX example. Level 1 would be what you're doing, building a rocket, right? Everyone builds a rocket. Well, not every, but you get what I mean, right? All the space companies build rockets, right? NASA. But what makes SpaceX special? Because it represents the reviving American space flight from the private sector. That's their unique edge. That's what makes them special, right? And level 3, what's their dent in the universe? What does the world actually look like if this works? Well, they're making mankind an interplanetary species. Because the goal of SpaceX isn't just to go to the moon like everyone else. It's to go to Mars, and then it's to conquer every single other planet in the solar system. That's their mission, right? That's the overarching mission. And you can stress test this mission, right? You ask questions like, I was 5 years younger, why would I care? That stress tests the impactfulness of your mission. Next, if I was a total stranger, why would I care? That stress tests the relevance of your mission. If I was about to die, why would I care? That's the most important question. And if it passes all these three questions, then that means you have a good mission. So well done. But really have a think about what mission you want, or what mission you represent. And the last part of this video will be about how do you actually make people care? Because mechanism that so very few people actually know about, and then even less of understanding, is if your mission is a mental stigmatoma or a mental blind spot in psychology. And so if your brand allows someone to realize they have a scotoma, which means like if your brand allows them to understand that they're missing something, then they will be lots more open to buying from you as they realize they have been wrong the whole time. And then once you reframe them with your mechanism, it allows the audience to feel more urge and, you know, they want to know your solution, right? It makes your solution relevant to them. And so that's what I like to call the overlap interjection or injection. And I'll get into that in 1 second, but I just want to dwell on the mental scotoma for a little bit more. Because what a scotoma is essentially your whole life you've been thinking one way, but then you get introduced to someone or something that completely shifts your idea or your perception of a certain topic. And you want to be the reason why someone shifts. And so if your mission allows them to see a broader picture. So right now your ICP probably sees such a small picture. But once you broaden the scope, once you allow them to see the full picture, and they realize, damn, like they're actually missing out on something, or they haven't actually thought about it that way. And then you inject your reframe into them. So you literally rewire how they think. They associate that feeling of like awe and that feeling of, you know, complete, utter like revelation. They associate that with your brand. And that makes it so powerful. Because once they associate with your brand, once they associate that emotion with your brand or that feeling with your brand, they'll literally buy into anything that you sell, no matter how shit or no matter how good it is. And so that's why, like, if you can inject a reframe into their mental scotoma, like, bro, crazy results will happen. And this is the more optimal way, or the more like the broader way to do this, is there's a Venn diagram, right? There's the circle of things that you care and the circle of things that the audience cares about. And so what you want to do is you want to lead, or you want to hook them in with your, like, the overlap, right? So combining what you care about and what your audience cares about. And you want your mission to be in that middle. So what you can then do is then, after the mission is like relevant to them, once you make it seem relevant to them, you can then reframe or use your unique mechanism, unique reframe mechanism, to then change their beliefs and then convince them to buy what you're selling. So think of it like a dog treat medicine. So you cover the medicine with a sweet treat to trick the dog to eat it. But what you're actually doing is you're covering what you really want to say. So that's your unique edge with something that the audience also cares about. And that's just so powerful because it masquerades. It's like a Trojan horse, right? You're like going into the city as a horse, thinking it's like a gift for them, right? Like they need to think that it's so helpful to them. And once you get into the city, right? Once you get into their mind, once they actually think your brand is relevant to them, then you can put your reframe and your unique mechanism, and bro, like they will be so sold on that. And essentially that's all you need to have a great brand identity. Like, there's so many people just complicating it, but once you get the basics, once you get the fundamentals, and once you really understand how the human psyche works, you can literally get anyone to buy from you. Without further ado, I wish you the best of luck.